All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Make It Take It podcast here on Monday, March 25th. I'm John Yaley, and I'm joined by my co hosts, Adam Oppenheim and Aiden Mattel, and Jason Myers producing. Really quick, just because I think we've all been watching a lot of college basketball. Any thoughts, any takeaways so far in the men's tournament?
The men's tournament's been awesome. I've been super entertained throughout. As a sports fan, it's something you continue to look forward to. It's just one thing I'll quickly mention because we're an NBA podcast. Is just that I think if you did a little March Madness style tournament for the NBA, I just do not think you'd see these crazy upsets. I think it'd be a lot more of kind of your typical playoff format of where the stronger teams are winning these games, just with the veteran experience. But that's just one thought I've had when comparing the NBA to March Madness. What do you guys think?
So, are you saying if it was single elimination, the playoffs?
Yeah, I think if say you have you take the format. Obviously, you can't do 64 teams, but you fill it in with the NBA teams. You're taking the top guys versus the bottom guys. I really do think these top teams would come out. Even in neutral courts. I think you wouldn't see the crazy upsets that you're seeing in March Madness. But that's what's great about March Madness when you have college guys playing. That's just one thing I've really noticed.
Yeah, all it takes is one guy getting hot, but also the game is shorter, so only 40 minutes and not a lot of time. If you get down early, you could be in trouble if you're a 2 or a 1 seed. I will say the takeaway for me is only one double-digit seed making the Sweet 16. That's pretty surprising. It really hurt my bracket, I will say. And the one double-digit seed to make it was NC State, who beat Oakland, another double-digit seed. So,
yeah, no, nothing crazy's happened for me. I was praying early in the Purdue Utah State game. Maybe we get an upset, but it seems the easy region has kind of worked out for the Boilermakers. And we'll just touch quickly on women's because our Indiana Hoosier team plays tonight, Assembly Hall, 6:30 against, 5 seed Oklahoma, I think.
yes.
I'll be at that game. I think, Adam, you will be too.
I'm
any
excited.
thoughts going in?
Yeah, I'm super excited to see what Indiana brings. I mean, they're best shooting team in the nation from 3, best team from the field. They win, they go against South Carolina. So that's massive because they absolutely destroyed UNC.
Yeah. That'll be a scary matchup, but
they got to get through Oklahoma first.
Yeah, exactly. Can't look too far ahead. So now we'll, get on track with the NBA. We'll start with a little cleaning the glass segment, just going over, past few days around the association. First thing I'll talk about was a game yesterday, I think afternoon. Milwaukee with the huge home win by 25 against the Thunder. Obviously, they're locked into the 2 seed. Or not really. Obviously, Cleveland's 3 games back, but likely will be the 2 seed. But in my opinion, a really important win to see them kind of handle a Western juggernaut. I know it's not quite Denver, but I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts from that game.
Yeah, I think
it's a big win. When you saw the Bucks, when Doc Rivers came in mid-season, they were struggling at first. They weren't getting anything to come together. They were, couldn't strike together some wins. And playing a team like the Thunder, they're one of the top teams at the West. It's just a big win for Milwaukee. And I really think that's, a big step for them this late in the season.
Yeah, it's massive for Milwaukee to beat these really good teams and really holding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to 12 points. I think he only shot the ball 12 times, I believe. So that was a certainly impressive win for the Bucks. Their defense has improved. They obviously had a big game against the Celtics about 5 days ago that they dropped, but it was a close game. Obviously, they were down by like 15 at the beginning of the fourth quarter, but they can hang with anyone with their offense. And when their defense turns it on, they are going to be a tough out in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I think I've always enjoyed Giannis and the Bucks, but it was shaky early in the year. I think anyone would admit. Obviously, they had the coaching change, as Aiden mentioned. I'm really optimistic about this team. They, as Adam touched on, the defense is much improved. I think they're top 6 or 7 since the All-Star break, holding OKC, one of the most talented offensive teams, best shooting teams, to 93. And what's really got to be a good sign if you're a Milwaukee fan is, obviously Giannis is consistent. He's going to be that guy. But Lillard has been shaky. He didn't have a great game yesterday, 11 points on 12 shots. But it didn't matter. Middleton has looked a little better. Obviously, Brook Lopez has his consistent role. And we've seen, Portis has been awesome for a couple weeks. Jay Crowder with some good minutes. So the supporting cast and the defense are the real things that I think I'd be optimistic about if I were a Milwaukee fan. And that'll kind of transition us into another team that is playing much better, actually, than the Bucks recently, and that's Houston, who they're only the 11th seed, but they've won 8 in a row. They just beat Golden State yesterday, and they are kind of in striking distance of making the play. And this seemed shocking, 2 weeks ago when Şengün got hurt, but they've actually played better since he went down. What are your guys' thoughts on the Rockets right now?
I mean, they're a young team, but they're led by Ime Udoka. And you guys remember, a couple seasons ago when the Celtics went to the finals, that team was absolutely abysmal. Ime Udoka turns them around to a stretch that just got them cooking on both sides of the ball, but starting with defense. And that's what this Rockets young team is now. Obviously on an 8-game winning streak. They haven't beaten a ton of good teams. They've beaten the Blazers once, Spurs once, Wizards twice, Bulls and Jazz. So they haven't faced a ton of good teams. But, I mean, the team's talented. I mean, they got Fred VanVleet as their veteran. Jalen Green has played a whole lot better. Dylan Brooks is a force on the defensive side of the ball. So it should be interesting to see what happens with the Rockets. And the Warriors, I think they're in a really tough position.
Yeah, I think the Rockets are getting hot right at the right time. Looking in their last 10, they're 9-1. They're a game back from Golden State at the 10, on the verge of getting in the play-in. And if they can continue to the success that they're seeing, continue with the way they're playing, they can really see, a spot to get into that play-in spot. Just because, looking at every single game, teams are going on runs, teams are falling down. So any win at this point in the season matters. So if they can kind of stride together some big wins throughout these next couple of weeks before the playoffs start, I really think they can see their name in the play-in.
Yeah, and I will say for the Warriors yesterday, they lost against the Timberwolves by 4. That was just a devastating loss because now they've lost to the Pacers and Timberwolves back-to-back. They were right there with the Lakers when they played, a week and a half ago, and you can't miss the play-in with Steph Curry. You cannot waste that year of the Warriors, him, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, all those guys, even Jonathan Kuminga with a big breakout year. They have to find a way to get into the play-in. They would be dangerous if they get in, but right now they're in a tough position. They should be better than the Rockets, especially without Şengün. That is a massive disappointment.
Yeah, no, I think your point about, you got a team with Curry, with, Draymond still productive, Wiggins, Kuminga not wanting to miss the playoffs. I think especially with that payroll, I think they're one of the top 3 or 4 spenders still. And if you're the 11th seed, that would not sit well. I'll just touch quickly on Jalen Green a bit more because he's been kind of the breakout guy since Şengün went down. He, in the month of March, 11 games, so decent sample. He's averaging almost 28, 5, and 3. He's shooting 50% from the field, almost 42% from 3. For a guy that's, at times seen more like a high volume, low efficiency guy. Incredible stretch from him. Rockets have been pretty fun to watch. And speaking of another game that's fun to watch, this is the last one we'll touch on in our opening segment. The Lakers yesterday beat the Pacers 150-145. Pretty absurd game, a lot of scoring. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, it was a crazy high scoring game. You saw 4 Lakers with 25 plus points. LeBron had 26, AD had 36, Reeves had 25, and then Dinwiddie with 26 points. I mean, that's pretty crazy. Think of that. Dinwiddie's dropping 26 with the Lakers, but an unreal performance from the Lakers. Just a high scoring game all throughout, and definitely an entertaining game for the fans as well.
Yeah, it was a massive fourth quarter, really, by the Pacers, scoring 46 points. But once again, you have question marks about the Pacers on defense. They just sometimes just do not look that connected. Pascal Siakam had a great game with 36 and 12. But once again, Tyrese Halliburton has really been on the struggle bus. I think I saw a stat that he's shooting like 20% on pull-up threes, I think in the past couple weeks. And before that, I think it was like before the in-season tournament, after, he has not been that good. Because remember when he was playing at that all-star level. People were saying he was like the best guard in the league. I think that was said by someone here, but I'm not in this room, literally, but someone was mentioning, Tyrese Halliburton's right there with Shea and Curry, and I was like, we got to wait another half a season. And right now, he's still dishing out dimes, but he's got to get that shot back.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just a slight defense of Halliburton. He might still be like not 100% coming back from injury, but definitely a tough stretch for him. And the Pacers, kind of some question marks going into the playoffs, which takes us into our next segment. This will be the meat of the show. We're just going to look at the kind of current standings and look at what the current matchups would be for round one. So the 1-8, 2-7, 3-6, 4-5. What does it look like in each conference? Obviously, there could be a lot of shifting. There are a lot of teams that are tied, about a game, half game apart. But just right now, about 2.5 weeks before the playoffs, where are we sitting? And so we'll start with the East. Celtics, obviously the 1 seed. Right now, they're slated to play the Philadelphia 76ers. So the Heat have the same record. So it could be the Heat or the Sixers, but right now it'd be the Sixers. I'm curious if you guys have a thought on that potential matchup. Which team would Boston rather face? Would you rather play a team with Joel Embiid or play this Heat team that's kind of been, your kryptonite in recent years?
Yeah, I think it could be interesting. I think you would honestly rather play the Heat. At some point, you have to get it out of the way. And this year, the Celtics look like a much different team, I will say. I mean, we'll see what happens when it comes playoff time, but this team is historically good. I think they have like the 4th best net rating in NBA history. That team cannot lose to this Heat team. And obviously, you have a lot of respect for Jimmy Butler, Eric Spoelstra, Bam Adebayo. But that would be the Celtics series to lose. And also mention the Bulls and Hawks at 9-10. I don't think either of them have any chance of making a run. I think they could maybe win a game off the Sixers if they don't have Embiid, and sneak into like the 8th spot or whatever. But neither of those teams deserve to even have a shot at the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I will say, though, is I do think that this year the Celtics, this is their year. It's their year to lose, if they face off versus Miami. But I think they'd rather play the Sixers as of now. I think Miami just scares me in the playoffs. No matter kind of what their regular season looked like, when it comes down to the playoffs, and you got, a coach like Spoelstra, you have guys like Jimmy Adebayo, they just come together. And I think that's known around the league, and they always click at the right time. I would be a little worried to play Miami, especially when you're comparing it with the Sixers or maybe the Bulls or the Hawks when the game in the play-in. But I don't know. That Miami team always scares me when it comes to the playoffs.
Now, would you have that same opinion? And I'll also ask Adam, since you said, kind of the Celtics team is a little better than the past. The Bucks would play, presumably, the other team in that 7-8 slot, which so maybe Miami, Philly. Just do the Bucks. They've also had issues with Miami in the past. Do they have a similar outlook where, hey, we'd rather play potentially Joel Embiid because of how good the Heat have been in the past, or are you not buying the Heat stuff this year?
I think it's the same thing. I think all the teams in the East, I do not think the Miami team is a team you want to match up with when it comes to the playoffs. Just with the recent success, just with the guys they have and the experience they have on their roster and with their coaching staff, I think it's just a team when it comes to the playoffs you do not want to see. And yeah, if say they bump down and maybe the Sixers, or they bump down to the 8 and the Sixers bump up to 7, it's just, I don't think you want to see this Miami team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I think for the Bucks, you'd be a little bit more scared of the Heat because they don't really have that same defense that the Celtics have had the entire season. If you get into a defensive battle, it probably favors the Heat late in games, which is crazy to say with Giannis and Dame. I would say the same thing if the Bucks and Celtics went down the stretch. You'd probably take the Bucks, but I think the Bucks would be able to handle the Sixers pretty easily, just because of their defensive system. It's so good, and I don't really think anyone on the Sixers can defend Jimmy Butler. Obviously, always has that extra energy going against his former team that took Tobias Harris over me.
Yeah, no, I actually would be more scared of Philly. I always seem to sleep on Miami come the playoffs, and every year they go on some kind of run like last year. But I'm still not gonna buy into them. I know they don't care that much about the regular season, but they have not looked that good. And just the chance of playing an 8 seed or a 7 seed, but they have maybe a healthy Joel Embiid. I know he's been questionable in the playoffs, but that ceiling is higher, I feel like, than any version of Miami would be. But I think if I was either of those top 2 teams, Boston or Milwaukee, I wouldn't mind if a Pacers team slipped down maybe. Obviously, if some of the Bulls pulled off some kind of play-in
Yeah,
2
you'd
wins in a
certainly
row.
face them.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't probably want to play either of them. But and I just mentioned the Pacers. Right now, they're the 6th seed slotted to play 3 seed, which is the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that one.
I mean, it's a clash of 2 different teams. The Pacers like to play up tempo. The Cavs are a pretty slow, methodical defensive team. I'm still very worried about the Cavs in the playoffs. It just haunts me. Not me personally, because I'm not a Cavs fan, I don't care. But their late game offense is just so bad. I just do not trust this team. Evan Mobley, not sure if he's ready. Jared Allen, he's had a great year, but once again, you're going up against some of the toughest players in the league. And obviously, if Tyrese Halliburton is like he was, before the All-Star break early in the season, the Pacers are going to be really tough to beat. And if they can play a little bit more defense, that will help. But once again, the Cavs offense is pretty much just Donovan Mitchell throwing up shots, which works when he scores 40. But if he goes, 10 for 27, they're probably not going to win.
Yeah, I kind of see this potential series as like a battle of the stars. I really think it could be a kind of a Mitchell versus Tyrese series where, whatever better guy's playing, that momentum will kind of translate to the rest of the team. And maybe one of the teams can pull away, a win away at the opposing team's stadium. But it's an interesting matchup for sure. And both of these teams kind of, as you said, not really haunt, but it's just there's some uncertainty to both of these rosters when it comes down to the playoffs and playing against the best competition that the NBA has to offer.
Yeah, no, Adam, I totally agree with you on the kind of question marks surrounding the Cavs come the playoffs. Still don't love the supporting cast. Mobley has really disappointed me this year. And I just, they were last year, I feel like they had a, more clear, less bumpy season and they lost in the first round.
Yeah, to the Knicks. And it wasn't particularly
Yeah, it
close.
was not. Yeah, so I have a bunch of questions. That being said, I'm curious / nervous to see how Indiana's pace and kind of style of play translates to the playoffs. I know it's cliche to say, but the game does typically slow down. There's not as much fast break opportunities. And I think Indiana would be a team like Aiden, you mentioned maybe the single elimination March Madness style, like the play-in was. I think they're better in that kind of scenario where you play them once, they kind of catch you off guard with their speed. Right. You're playing a team 4 to 7 times in a couple weeks, they're going to adjust and be like, all right, here's what we can do to kind of figure out their pace. So I don't feel great about either team in that matchup, but I think Cleveland is probably a little better position for playoff basketball. I don't know if you guys have any response. But
I mean, I would just say it's going to be hard if, both these teams game plan about taking their star of the game. And like you mentioned, if the Cavs game plan take Halliburton out of the game, who's picking up that slack? Pascal Siakam for probably the Pacers. And for the Cavs, it's Darius Garland. And you don't feel like particularly great about either, but we'll see what happens.
All right, so the last Eastern matchup that we'll look at is the 4-5, which right now is the Knicks versus the Magic, but the 3-5 is only separated by a game, so this could change. But if it were Knicks Magic, what would your guys' kind of big thoughts going into it be?
I love the Knicks. I think they're the team in the NBA that'll win you one or two rounds in the playoffs, and then they're not doing anything else. I think it's tough to say, but I have so many friends who are Knicks fans. I'm from the East Coast area, and I always ask them, with an exciting season like this year, like, do they really think they can win? And most of the time it's no. But I think when you get a packed MSG, New York, it's just so tough to win there. So especially if they're the higher seed and they can have those first 2 games at home, I think it's, they're set up for success. But once they get into the later rounds, once they're facing better competition, when it's really not just a momentum thing and kind of a feel of the moment, I think they're when you get into those 4 to 7 game series. It's one of those teams too where I think a March Madness type style or format, they can do very well. When you kind of break it down into a full series and go into deeper, I think they struggle. But I like them early on in the playoffs, and I would like them against the Magic in the first round.
Yeah, I think this would be so interesting because you just don't know um, how the Magic are going to perform at all in the playoffs. They started off the season hot, then they cooled off because their schedule got harder, and now they've been pretty good, 7-3 in their last 10. But they've been playing a lot better on both sides of the ball. I do worry a bit about their half court offense. Paulo Banchero is a great player. Franz Wagner is a great player, but the best player in that series would be Jalen Brunson, and I don't think there's any other player who would particularly come close. I like Banchero as a player, but Brunson just able to get to his spot and stuff. But I will say Jonathan Isaac coming on for the Magic would be huge to defend Jalen Brunson. Still trying to find this stat about him, but he's been so good in his last 10 or so games. He's been shooting like 40% from three. A couple days ago, he had 25 points, 7 rebounds, 10 for 13 from the floor. He's that length that you need against Jalen Brunson. You need a bigger wing because he just can shoot right over those guards, easy separation.
Yeah, I love, Adam, that you mentioned Isaac. I was waiting for a little Magic love, which I am glad to give. I really like this Magic team. I like how good they are, and they're still young. They're kind of almost Thunder East, maybe a little, earlier on in the process, but really like the team. And you mentioned Isaac, who I love, his length, mentioned his shooting, his defense is really noticeable when you watch. And just the team in general. I mean, Suggs has been awesome. There were question marks about, is this guy a bust? He's been, what you want him to be. We knew he was a great defender. Now he's shooting it a lot better. Paolo looks like he was kind of the most pro-ready of those top 3 guys with Chet and Jabari, but he's even better than I think anyone kind of would have thought. And Franz I wouldn't say, I don't think he's regressed, but he's kind of been stagnant, but it still works for the team. I really like this team. I agree there are question marks about how good they'd be in the playoffs, but the Knicks themselves, I really like Brunson. OG, like will he be healthy? Will Randall be healthy? I don't love if you give me Knicks full strength, I'm pretty confident in them. But the way they're kind of shaky right now with health, I might actually pick Orlando in this one, even with the limited experience.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I know a lot of Knicks fans really hate Randall, but then you watch the Knicks play without him, and it's Dante DiVincenzo as the second option, and you're not feeling so good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And they'll round out the East for us. We'll just shift to the West. Right now, the 1-8 would be an awesome series. It would be Denver versus Dallas. Super fun. We saw this matchup, I think 2 Sundays ago, which had the Kyrie game winner. What are your guys' thoughts?
It's hard. You have 2 great teams, but it's hard to go against Denver when it comes to the playoffs. They just have such a in-depth roster. I mean, I really think they have just so many working pieces that can come together. And when they have kind of home court advantage, that helps so much. But they're facing a scary, scary Dallas team. I mean, Dallas being the 8 would be extremely scary. The West is just so stacked this year. You have guys like Kyrie, Luka. They've been playing well as of recent. In their last 10, they're 7-3, kind of finding some right strides, finding the momentum as they come towards. But I mean, it's a great series. I could see it going late into, game 6 or 7. But I would lean towards the Nuggets, I would say.
Yeah, I would lean heavily towards the Nuggets. I think this is a Nuggets team that is not scared to face anyone. Now you're looking at the Lakers at the 9 spot. They do not want to face the Nuggets either. They got swept last year. This Nuggets team, unbelievable. Even though they don't have a ton of depth, they get just enough from their bench to complement their starters, and obviously Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. That 1-2 punch is huge. Down the stretch, they're so good in clutch time. And it's going to be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope who would guard Luka Doncic, you would assume. And then they have Aaron Gordon to switch on to him as well. But so the Mavericks would have a really tough time. I do think it would be interesting because the Mavs and Kings right now are tied. If the Mavs jump the Kings, and the Kings could possibly get beaten out by whoever wins that 9-10 matchup and somehow be out of the playoffs after that team was really good last year. They took the Warriors to 7 in the playoffs, but I mean, the Kings have home court advantage, let's say, if they drop below the Mavs and they face the Lakers. I don't know if you feel that good as a Kings fan, even if you have home court. It's LeBron James.
Yeah, plus we've seen Sabonis in, a playoff type setting has not been
Well,
nearly the same player.
I'll also say to that, Anthony Davis has not won against Domantas Sabonis in his career.
Yeah,
So,
that is a good point. But I agree that I would feel really nervous if I were a Kings fan. Kind of shifting back to Denver, Dallas. The one thing positively I'll say for Dallas is that in their most recent matchup, Jokic had, for his standards, an off game, which is 16, 11, and 7. Still very good, but didn't shoot it as well, and not as impactful overall. But that being said, I agree with you guys. Denver is the team to beat. They're now the 1 seed too. So if they have home court throughout the Western playoffs again, I think if they're healthy, kind of a wrap. Now we'll go to the 2 seed Thunder, who dropped down. They're half game back at Denver. They would play right now Sacramento, who we just mentioned. I'll just start really quickly. I like this Thunder team versus Dallas or Sacramento, who are in the 7 or 8. I think if they were to play a Phoenix type team who's only a half game up in the 6th spot, maybe I'd get a little nervous. But overall, I actually feel pretty decent despite the youth about this Thunder team. I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I agree. I'd feel pretty comfortable versus the Kings or the Mavs. The Suns would worry me a little bit for sure. But I'm really am interested to see how the Thunder come to perform when the playoffs start. As you said, they're a young team, not much vet experience. So when the big stage comes, when the playoffs come, I am really interested to see how they play. But I would lean towards the Thunder versus the Kings and Mavs for sure. And versus the Suns, I really think that'd be a great matchup, and I think it would be close to a pick 'em, honestly.
as much as I don't love the Thunder, particularly in a playoff setting, compared to what their record would indicate, which would be like second best odds to win the Western Conference, I feel very good about them going up against the Kings or the Mavericks. Obviously, the rebounding has been an issue this year, but it's been better as of late. You do wonder, like, our team's gonna sag off like a player like Lou Dort for the Thunder and just make him shoot the ball and sort of pack the paint against SGA, because the Thunder don't shoot like a ton of threes, but they shoot it so efficiently. That should be interesting to see, because I was expecting like Gordon Hayward to get a little bit more run with the Thunder, who they picked up at the trade deadline. But once again, I feel pretty good about them against the Mavericks as well. Because I just don't think anyone in the Mavs can stop SGA, especially getting to the rim, creating for others. J-Dub, Jalen Williams, has had a terrific season, came up really clutch in games this year. So at least for the first round, the Thunder, I would try to avoid the Lakers. But if you get Kings, Mavericks, you're feeling good.
All right, nice. And we've mentioned Phoenix a little bit. They're right now in the 6th seed. They play at Minnesota, who's the 3 seed. What are your guys' kind of big previews about that one?
I think this could be really a struggle for the Timberwolves. And I'm not exactly a Timberwolves hater, but I'm also not a believer in what they can do in the playoffs. Obviously, it comes down to Karl-Anthony Towns being healthy. That's definitely a factor. But the Timberwolves, the past couple of years when they've played in the playoffs, it has just looked wild. Like, what are they doing on the offensive side of the ball? They can defend at a high level, but I just don't know how much I trust this team in the playoffs. I've seen it before. Now they have at least a veteran, and Mike Conley, which is huge. Rudy Gobert, are they going to hack a Gobert and send him to the line? Jaden McDaniels, can he make shots? Anthony Edwards, can he, be efficient? You're just not sure. And they don't have a ton of pieces. One I do feel really good about is Naz Reid has been massive for the Timberwolves. He's a great backup big off the bench.
Yeah, I agree. It's crazy to say, but you see the Timberwolves, they're 49-22. They're sitting 3rd in the West. But I agree. I think they have like a lot to prove still. And when it comes to the playoffs, I still think they're kind of need to show the world that they're there to play and they're one of the, premier teams in the NBA. And I think when you go to the playoffs, the big stage, you have these games coming down to the wire, where the fourth quarter, but specifically just those last couple of minutes of the game are so crucial. I don't know if Minnesota is going to be taking the edge and, making those big plays at the end and winning those games. I kind of would edge towards Phoenix, but I don't know. They're just they in my eyes they still kind of have something to prove to the rest of the league and to the fans.
I agree. I think I mention it almost every podcast that Minnesota's brought up. The maturity is the big question mark for me. I love this team, their defense, their athleticism. Edwards might be my favorite guy to watch in the whole league, but just even I like the coach, but the team's maturity is a big question mark. Obviously you want Towns in there, but then Towns isn't the best playoff guy. So
No,
like, what do what are you doing there with that? What are you hoping for as a fan when it comes to his injury? So I'd feel nervous. That being said, I also have a lot of questions about Phoenix. Their depth, their defense, their late game has been terrible. I don't think that would improve in the playoffs.
Yeah, their fourth quarter is worse in the league, I believe, which is crazy because
you have Durant.
You do have Kevin Durant
Yeah.
and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, who will be acknowledged, I guess, but I don't think he particularly brings like a whole lot, but compared to what their bench is, I mean they sold out for those 3 players or 2 players because they drafted Booker. And they were pretty much left with Grayson Allen as their best role player, which is fine. But then you have Nurkic, who's a liability on the defensive end, and everyone else like Eric Gordon, Nasir Little, Josh Okogie. Like, what do they do well? Nothing really. I mean, they bring a little bit of defensive edge, but if you can just leave them open from 3 entire series, that's tough to deal with.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just our last matchup in the West will be the 4-5 Clippers versus the Pelicans. What are your thoughts, Aiden?
It could be an interesting matchup. I mean, right now the Clippers would be the 4, the Pelicans would be the 5. The Clippers would have the home court advantage. They're also definitely the more experienced team with guys like James Harden. You have Kawhi, Paul George, Russell Westbrook. I would give the edge to the Clippers. I think just with the combination of the veteran experience alongside, having the home court advantage, I think it plays to their strengths, and I think they definitely can pull out at least one win in the playoffs. But I think just with their strong veteran roster, I think that gives them a big kind of edge in this series, which could kind of play to their strengths and see them winning the Pelicans.
One interesting storyline to always watch is whatever team James Harden is on and how he performs in the playoffs, because it's been so up and down, a lot more downs than ups, I will say, for how he's judged in the regular season. Not as much anymore, but during his MVP years. But the Pelicans also have question marks. Brandon Ingram, I think he has a knee injury as well, and he's going to be reevaluated in a couple weeks. But I think he should be good for the playoffs. But Zion Williamson's really the big one. I think I've said this before. He's the best player on the Pelicans roster. You want him to get, those touches down the stretch. And can he do anything besides, just trying to go straight to the rim? Can he diversify his game? Because it seems a little bit too predictable at times. And with the Clippers' late game offense, I don't think it's predictable at all. They can go a multitude of different ways with Kawhi, Paul George, even Westbrook attacking the rim, James Harden as well. Norman Powell can really hit some clutch shots. They're a tough team to beat, and the Pelicans just got to find a way to gain a little bit of momentum in the playoffs. They're always stuck around the play-in. This time, they're probably not going to be in the play-in. So you got to see how they perform in a series.
Yeah, no, I think this is probably the most interesting matchup that we've touched on so far. If you were to ask me this question 2-3 weeks ago, I would have said, no question, the Clippers. And I still think they're the better team, but they've been pretty shaky for a few weeks now after that awesome stretch, kind of, halfway, the middle half of the year, I guess. Whereas the Pelicans have been the opposite. They've been really hot lately, 8-2 in their last 10. And, we Adam mentioned Zion. He's been great after, at the play-in. He looked really bad, out of shape. And now he's kind of back in, prime form. So, but at the end of the day, I agree with you, Adam, that the depth of the Clippers, I think, is too much. They have so many guys that I like, even if Westbrook's hurt, which would be tough for them come the playoffs. I like all the guys on the team. And Kawhi, if he's healthy, last year in that Phoenix series, the first 2 games, I think, were the only ones he played. He looked like the best player on the floor, even with KD on the, playing in that game. So you got Kawhi still. Obviously, Paul George has been this kind of great Swiss Army knife, malleable guy. I would go the Clippers reluctantly, though, because of how they've looked lately, because of Harden's playoff past, and because it's the Clippers, and
They don't win.
bad things happen to them. So
Pretty much.
that'll close out our playoff preview. Again, the play-in starts April 16th, and then the playoffs themselves begin the 20th. So about 3 weeks out from the play-in. So we'll be monitoring that closely as we approach the end of the year. Our last segment will be a little bit of At the Buzzer, where we're looking at games in the next few days. Which ones jump out, which ones are kind of appointment viewing. I'll start with you, Adam. What are you looking at?
So I'll start off with a game today, and that's the Pacers Clippers at 10:30. I think that could be really interesting with, once again, some contrasting styles. Clippers, they lost yesterday against the Sixers, which was not a good loss at all, especially in the fourth quarter. It was, let me look at it here, but it was a horrendous fourth quarter by the Clippers, if I remember correctly. It was only 33-24, but at one point they only had like 10 points, like halfway through the fourth quarter, against a team led by Tyrese Maxey and Kelly Oubre.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't feel great about the Clippers now, but for the Pacers, I mean, they're fighting to stay out of the play-in. They do not want to be in the play-in. I will say that. None of these teams do, and although the Pacers could set up to play the Bucks, which would be that would be a fire series.
Would be fun to watch. A little play-in rematch with
Yeah.
that one. I enjoy that matchup too. I just think 2 fun teams to watch. The Pacers have been kind of a league pass team for me this year, at least when Halliburton's been healthy. I love watching him play. The pace that they play with, fun, youthful team. And the Clippers, we just talked about them a lot. They're struggling, but they're still really good, really talented. And you would think with, kind of the veterans they have, T. Lue, who's a good coach, who kind of gets on stars, you think at some point a game like yesterday, which Adam talked about, a tough loss, at some point it's going to click that they're going to be like, all right, we need to, kind of lock in for the end of the year. So I'm curious to see if that, kind of begins tonight.
I agree. And I'll jump ahead. Another game I'm looking forward to that's not today, but tomorrow is the Lakers versus the Bucks. And I said it before on an earlier episode, but when you're looking at the NBA and when you have some of the greatest players playing against each other, I think you have to tune in and watch. LeBron James, Giannis, you have guys like Dame and AD as well. It's just a battle of a battle of some of the strongest players in the NBA. And right now in the season, it just feels like every game is a playoff game for the Lakers. They're the 9 seed. They're 2.5 games back of kind of the 8, getting some sort of better situation, but still being in the play-in. But that, with Phoenix at 6, they're only 3 games back. So every game's so important to them right now. And as we said earlier, the Bucks are kind of finding some momentum, kind of putting some things together. Can they continue that success, or kind of are the Lakers going to make more of that push towards the playoffs? But that's an interesting game to look out for, I think.
Yeah, I think that is going to be a massive game tomorrow, and it'll be interesting to see, once we get to like the last week of the regular season, a lot of people are going to be sitting their star players out, most likely if they're locked into a certain position. But this one, the Lakers got to have everyone good to go at this point, which is good because usually, they can be without, one of their star players, which could be really tough to watch for the Lakers, Bucks, a numerous number of teams. But yeah, this should be a really fun time. Lakers are going to have to come out, firing. Like you mentioned, Dinwiddie had a huge game. That's like the first 26-point game in like 4 months or something. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I also have this game marked, not just because the big names in it, but as you guys are talking about, must win for the Lakers. They're, I don't think there's in a ton of danger of falling out of the play-in like the Warriors are, but I would not want to be in the 9 spot. I would want to be in that 7-8 game with LeBron, with AD, just win one game and you're in the playoffs. Having to win back to back with an older team and then facing, Denver or OKC or Minnesota, that's kind of a death sentence. So they need every win that they can get. They're at home. They, I think, beat Milwaukee earlier in the year. So huge game for them, and obviously two fun teams to watch. I'll touch on kind of a weird game, which will be, I think it's tonight. Yeah, it's tonight at 8:00. And that is Phoenix at San Antonio. I'll try to make the case. Phoenix obviously is playing for something. They're only a half game out of the plan. But for me, this is really just a Wembanyama watch. I have, been loving this stretch the past couple months because the team, although not great, has been a little more competitive in games, and he seemed to blossom to another level defensively. So just give me the Suns, obviously have Durant and Booker, and then Wembanyama for, a couple hours, and I'm happy.
Yeah, that's fair. I can't really argue with that point at all. Another one I'll talk about, Warriors Heat tomorrow. That should be interesting. Obviously, because you mentioned the Warriors in the West are in a tough position. Heat trying to stay out of the play-in in the Eastern Conference makes it a lot easier to make a run, even though they've done it before. Trying to get out of the play-in. So I think it's going to be a really interesting day of basketball tomorrow because all four of the games on are just great games. That was an absolutely stacked slate.
It is, yeah. And I'll just touch on that game quickly. Great play-in matchup. Two teams kind of playing must-win games. Warriors even more desperate. And I think we have, they have pedigree and have shown good things in the past, but we have big questions about both. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Aiden.
No, it's a cool matchup. It's the battle of the play-ins from different conferences. Miami's sitting at the 7, and then the Warriors sitting at 10, and with the Rockets only being a game back, I mean it's such an impactful game, and the Warriors really need to find some wins now towards the end of the season, or they're going to end up outside that playoff spot. And as you said earlier, when you have a guy like Stephen Curry on your roster, you cannot be missing the playoffs, let alone missing the play-in. So it'll be a very interesting game.
All right, and that'll wrap it up for us here at the Make It Take It podcast. We got a couple really good NBA games ahead of us, but until Wednesday, we'll see you later.